Two, it's Lindsay and Winnie, a sleepy cat. She's yawning. Oh, stinky breath. I'm here to talk about the books I read this last week. Like I mentioned before, I had a pretty rough week, so I tended to stick with comfort reads. I read quite a few children's books because they're easy to get through. I don't have to use a lot of mental energy, as you will, to read them. And I read a couple mysteries, and of course nonfiction too. I can't not read that. So I am talking a bit about some history books as well. So the first book I read was a history book about presidents. It's a book about presidents that I probably wouldn't have read each of their biographies if it wasn't, for this book. And it's The Accidental Presidents by Jared Cohen. It's 8 men who changed America. And here's some pictures of some of the men, 4 of the men that are covered in this book. And this is all about people who became presidents who weren't elected to office, either due to the presidents dying from illness or them dying through assassination. And so it was really interesting. Like I said, some of these presidents, like Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, I've read biographies of them. It's the big presidential figures in our history. But some of these other ones, like for example John Tyler or Chester Arthur, Calvin Coolidge, these some ones that I'm mentioning, I wouldn't even know really where to find a good biography, because they're not commonly out in the publishing world. So yeah, it was really interesting. It goes from it goes in chronological order of the first president dying to present day. And yeah, at the beginning it talks about how wasn't in our Constitution of how do you replace the president who died in office. There's controversy over should it be the vice president, should it be elected, have someone elect to replace the president. And so it was really interesting at that part. But then some of these figures themselves, some of them were, I don't know, boring figures or whatnot, what have you. But some of them were fascinating. For example, what's his name? Harding. I can't remember what his first name is. It's not even mentioning it. But the President Harding, oh my goodness. I knew relatively nothing about him, to be honest. And to find out, he was wrapped up in so many scandals. And it wasn't all him. Some of it was his friends. And, with the mess they were kind of entangling him into. And he dies, and so Calvin Coolidge takes over. And Calvin Coolidge is president during the Roaring 20s, the 1920s. And so he didn't have to do anything to, kind of keep the momentum going in the economy and all that, because, it was booming on its own in a way. And so thankfully, because he kind of was a lazy figure. I mean, he was known for taking long naps. And he was, sleeping a long stretch of time at night, and he was taking naps during the afternoon. He just didn't want to be bothered with anything. So luckily, the duty wasn't called on him to do anything, because if it was, I don't know how that would have turned out. So the book really encapsulates, the president that died, and then the possibilities of who took over, and then what would have happened if that president had lived, that avenue, and then the vice president, what he accomplished. And then also talks about with the vice president they chose, because when you think an election today, you don't always have it in your mind, this is the president if this one dies. It's just a person that's tacked on for to get those votes, or to counterbalance something in the main person's life. And so yeah, it talks about the other possible vice presidents they were going to pick. What were their policies, and what were they what could have been accomplished by them. So yes, it was a really fascinating read for me. I mean, I thought some of these Millard Fillmore or like I said, Chester Arthur, all these people I really had not much interest in. This really garnered an interest for me to learn more about them. Maybe not a whole biography on some of them, but especially knowing more about their time period, and the policies that they were handling. Yeah, it was fascinating. And then the book ended with, possible, assassination attempts that, weren't successful. For example, of course, everyone knows, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, but the assassinator, Booth, his father was sending threatening letters to Andrew Jackson. And so the son kills Lincoln. But it wasn't, just, everyone knows about that, that Booth shot Lincoln. But there's an attempt on Andrew Johnson to be murdered as well. So we could have been out without both of them. Andrew Jackson didn't have exactly the best roles of, with Reconstruction, but it also talks about, why Abraham Lincoln chose him. It wasn't just like an idiotic choice. There was reasons behind it, and for that time period and for what was happening. And so it goes into depth with all this. So it's really a lot of fascinating things in this. It's not just like a boring history book. And then anyway, so at the end of the last chapter, it's like, possible attempts that, could have altered history. And that part is it was so interesting. And then, yeah, so I don't want to talk too much about this book, because I could go on and on about it. I can make a whole video on this book. So I'll move on from here. Yes, if you're interested in presidents, this one was good. Yes. The next one, talking about history, was a book I read for Steve Donahue's read along. This last week was Common Sense by Thomas Paine. And this cover is pretty bland, but it has like just a little inscription of from the book. And this I've heard a lot about when I read American Revolution books or just history books in general. Sometimes this book will come up because it had a huge impact on really inspiring the people to start this revolution. Because before the revolution happened, not everyone wanted freedom from England. Some of them were kingsmen, and when you read about the American Revolution, you hear about hordes and hordes of thousands of people who left America when we became a democracy. A lot of people left even before and after because they didn't support it. It wasn't like a united front. But this book really jarred people into wanting a democracy. And so this book really points out wanting individual freedom and equality, social equality, those two. And then he's also contrasting that against having kings and queens and the what's the word I'm thinking of, like one second, I'm blanking on the word, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about, having that kings and queens mind frame and that government. And so yes, so this one it was really short. If you haven't read it and you're interested in history, then you should give it a go. I'm surprised it took me this long to read it, considering how many American Revolution books I've read and how many history books I've read. But yeah, it was pretty readable. It wasn't like I wasn't enraptured in the book at any point, but it was still interesting to see the mindset of America, a person who was living in this 1700s, and and what they thought of America before it became America, in a sense. So yes, and the next one I read going back to what I was talking about was reading some children's book, is I read the second book in the Babysitter's Club series, and this one is Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls, and it's kind of a mystery because this story's all about the babysitters. They're the adults in the house while the parents are gone, and so but they're still children, and they get upset, get kind of spooked if they get these random calls from people and no one's answering the phone. They pick up the phone, hello, and you can kind of hear breathing or whatnot, and it just hangs up. So they're like, who's calling? And it comes to find out that in the neighborhood beside them, there's a person, jewelry thief, and so the whole club thinks that that they're going to get robbed. The houses they're staying at, and so it's kind of a mystery, and it kind of invokes in me, as a kid, if you're alone in the house and you hear these creepy noises, you're startled, and what's that? And so some of the kids, barricade their doors for sound, so they'll hear a noise if someone's trying to get in. So yes, it really had that feeling of make sure the doors are locked, that kind of thing. So it was really a lovely book to read, and so I will for sure be reading the next one in the series. And then after that, I read another children's book, Stargirl. It's another book I've been meaning to read for quite a while, and I just happened to get to it. And it's Jerry Spinelli, Stargirl, with a cute cover. And this is a really unique book. It was a little bit too simple for me, just because how it was written. These people are supposed to be in high school, but it really came off as either late elementary school, 5th grade, or middle school, just because of their actions. But it's about a star girl who she creates her own name because she doesn't want a boring name. She wants to have her own personality and what she's feeling in that moment right now. She feels like a star girl. She could be feeling like a balloon or whatever, whatever random name she wants to call herself later on. And so it's all about, she's homeschooled, and so she decides to go to high school. And the people in this like high school, they're all normal kids. They're all following with the crowd. They're all like sheep in a way. They don't want to stand out. They want to be conforming as much as possible. And so she gets in, and she doesn't care about any of that. She's acting different. Like every time she goes to a different classroom, she sets her desk up with like a flower pot, and she sets this little curtain around her desk to make it like a homey area. And everyone like look at her like she's crazy. And she comes to high school not in like jeans and a t-shirt like everyone else, but homemade clothes and dresses with like all sorts of like doodads in her hair. And so yeah, it was a nice read for this. And then of course she meets a couple of friends, and at first everyone's like, who are you? And then she becomes friends with them, and they're like, oh, I want to be part of, like, she's like the cool kid. So it's all about how like the swings was what I'm trying to say, the swings and perception of this person. And so it's all about conformity. Like, do they conform to her, or is she going to eventually conform to them? How does that resolve itself? It's such a unique character. But yeah, it was a nice read. And this next one is a mystery book. If I can pull up the cover. Let's see. One moment. If I can get it. It's like freezing on me. I don't know what's happening. Well, anyway, I don't know why my keyboard's popping up, but it's Elizabeth George's The Punishment She Deserves. And this is the second book. Oh, no, that's not the second book. It's the 20th book in the Inspector Lynley series. And this one came out in 2018. And I haven't read any of this series. I had meant to read the first one, but because it's a really successful series. There's 20 books in the series. But so yeah, I just happened to pick this one up because it recently came out. I think for mystery books, often you can dip in and out whatever book you happen to be picking up. And so this one is about Inspector Lynley and Barbara Havers are the two investigators, if you will, and there's also another one that's involved. But anyway, this main mystery is in this little town. There's a very upstanding citizen who is part of the Catholic Church, and he wants to become a pope, and so he's volunteering a lot. He's helping the community, and he's part of like the church. So he sounds like a very upstanding character. But all of a sudden, he commits suicide after being brought to jail for this possible crime that's being committed. And it looks okay. I mean, the suicide, it's hard to, for the way he hung himself. And so it looks like, how can you pretend for that part, how can you pretend to be a suicide? How can someone else have committed the suicide? Is what I'm trying to say. It looks like a suicide, but maybe it isn't. And so it's all about, finding, what is really going on this town. And the other plot of this story is the people living in the town, like these group of college kids. Because the college is a predominant point in this community. It's like kind of what brings them all together as this college. And so, yeah, you get to know like all these like rambunctious college students. And so it's like a contrast between this uplifting, Catholic character and, the college students. And then the investigators are coming from London to figure out what's going on and, what they're seeing. And so it was a really fun mystery. It was quite a long book. It was, I think, like 700 it's almost 700 pages. So it was a longer mystery than I would want to pick up a mystery. I like my mystery to be kind of like short. So like, the plot's fast paced and you're getting like on the seat of your pants kind of thing. Yeah, on the edge of your seat. That's what I want to say with reading this mystery. But even though it's a little bit drawn out, it was well worth the time invested because, you get to learn more about the characters. And so it's not just all about the plot, but you get a really good feel for these characters. So yes, I'll for sure be looking at other books in this series as well. Maybe one of the shorter ones. Like it's a little bit drawn out, but yeah, I want to maybe start at the beginning and see, how these characters have developed over time with the investigators. And this next one is a history book, going back to history. It's To Hell and Back, Europe 1914 to 1949 by Ian Kershaw. And this is part of a series about European history. It's the Penguin History of Europe, and this is number 8. And Ian Kershaw is doing another book, 1950 to, I think, present day. And so he's broken up, European history into 2 parts. And I enjoyed this book. It's hard to condense, European history from that time span with, World War One, the Depression, World War II, all that's jam-packed in. So he mainly focuses on, even though it's European history, he's mainly focusing on Britain, France, Soviet Union, and Germany, with a little bit of side characters, if you will, of Italy and Spain, with a couple sprinklings of other countries, but it's mainly focused on those. And so, I think it's a really good, this book's a really good introduction if you don't know a lot, or you haven't read a lot about World War One or World War II. It's a really good introduction to that. I personally wanted a little bit more from the book. It was 624 pages, so that's that's a big book, but it isn't for the topic that's being discussed. But for sure, it gave you little tidbits of this is really interesting. So I want to learn more about that, and so it's a really good jumping off point, I think, for people who want to read history. And it was really easily written. The material wasn't really hard to follow or anything. It wasn't too textural based. If that makes sense. I don't know. And this last book that I finished this week was another children's book, and it was Matilda by Roald Dahl. And like I mentioned before, I had seen the movie, but as a kid, but I've never read the book. And I hate to say it, but I didn't love the book. I think if I read it as a kid, I probably liked it more. Now as an adult reading it, I don't have that nostalgia for him. I think Roald Dahl, I read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as a kid, but nothing else by him that I've read. And so I'm picking it up as an adult. And just, I don't know, the story felt really abrupt, especially the ending. It kind of just cut off without much expansion on, what was going on. It was just I don't want to spoil. I'm sure most people know how the story goes, but it ends with the family leaving, and Matilda gets to stay with her teacher, and so it's just that last chapter, a couple pages, and that that wrapped up the whole storyline of how Matilda was living in not the best situation with her parents, but so anyway, how it was written, I don't know, it didn't completely connect with me. I didn't like, of course, you don't like the parents, how they're acting, but as Matilda, she's scheming and finding ways of getting back, revenge on the parents for how they're treating her by, she glued the hat on the father, or, she was doing all sorts of stuff like that. She dyed his hair, she was putting in his conditioner. She was putting this dye to turn his hair. And so anyway, instead of communicating with the parents, having some dialogue, she was conniving with that. And so I like Matilda, but I didn't like those actions, and what the author was kind of supporting with that. And then how the characters kind of were portrayed. It seemed to me that all of the characters who, didn't look the best, or overweight, tended to be the bad characters, and then all of the skinny, pretty characters were the nice ones. And so I didn't like that portrayal of the characters. But overall, the story, I liked it. I didn't hate it, but I think it could have been better. So yes, don't hate me. That's just my opinion. So yeah, these are the books I read. I'm hoping to have I had a really good reading week. I'm hoping to have a better week coming up. I'm trying to resolve some things this weekend. I'm having a little bit of a stressful weekend. Still, it's you can't things be wrapped up nice and tidy, even though it's a weekend. But things are looking up. I'm hoping to resolve some issues, and so enjoy my week that's coming up. But yeah, I had a nice reading week. I read a couple children's books, which I don't always pick up, but I was just in the mood for them. So yes. And then before I go, I just want to show this cute cup that I got. I have it in the background. And I thought it was just fitting with Winnie sitting with me in books. And so this is Kat's Books, Life is Sweet. And so, yes, this book is so fitting for me. I love getting, especially with, not books, this cup. Yeah, I don't know if I said that. So my mind is just like, woo, I've had so much on my mind lately. But, in my kitchen, like, I don't like having, you know, all matching, from mugs. I like having, you know, all, like, random things that, you know, matter to me. And so this was, like, perfect, like a bookish, cat. Yes, a mug. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm gonna get off now before I keep rambling and not make any sense whatsoever. So yeah, let me know if you read any of these books, and I hope all of y'all have a wonderful week. Thanks. See you soon, BookTube.